I've tried to record this video at least 3 or 4 times now. My phone keeps cutting off from the heat, which is kind of ironic because I'm standing out here and I'm not cutting off yet. But anyway, the whole video was supposed to be about how, lawns are the ultimate form of, tricking ourselves into thinking we have control over nature, and it's also the ultimate form of, conspicuous consumption and, displays of wealth. But anyway, I don't have time to talk about that now because the phone's going to cut off. But the next level up, in terms of control of the environment from a lawn is probably like a small garden. A lot of people think gardens should be neat and tidy, the traditional image of like a little English garden where everything's in neat little rows and, there's no weeds and, it's clear that it's a maintained type of system. This was supposed to be a nice, neat little clean, tidy raised bed in the front yard. And in the winter time, it was a neat, clean, tidy raised bed. It had little cabbages all in neat little tidy rows. And now that summer has taken hold, it's mainly a dollar weed infestation. When I chopped down all the cabbages, all the neat little tidy cabbages in their clean little neat rows, when I chopped them all down and harvested them all, I planted bell peppers, transplants in neat little tidy rows. I'm standing in a fire ant hill. I want to talk a little bit about fire ants too when I was going to talk about, control. There's fire ant hills all over my yard right now, and there's not really much I can do about it. You can put down fire ant killer once in a while, but it's very expensive and doesn't work after a rain, and we get rain constantly in the summer. But yeah, so I planted these bell peppers in neat little tidy rows. Wow, I was literally standing in an entire mound of fire ants that I didn't see, and now my feet are covered in bites. I'm gonna throw a little bit of vinegar on it. But anyway, so I planted the bell peppers in neat little tidy rows, and they're doing okay, but the dollar weed has invaded and is now dominating, and some zinnia from last year apparently dropped seeds or something, because now there's massive zinnias outcompeting my bell peppers. But anyway, so this is kind of an intermediate level of control. This was neat and tidy, and now it's kind of full of dollar weed, but dollar weed's actually edible. So the whole idea of, maybe we don't need to think about controlling environments all that much if we can find ways to do less work and still benefit. There's not really much I can do about the dollar weed. I live in a wet area, so dollar weed's just going to be everywhere. I could try to spend a bunch of money on like chemicals, or I could come out here and pull it every 4 hours. That's how fast it grows, I feel like. I swear I pulled all the dollar weed in this raised bed like 4 days ago. But anyway, so this is still kind of a level of control. It's not super productive. It's making a good bit of food and it looks nice and clean. I had all these carrots in here earlier and I pulled some carrots. We probably should just make a video about pickling carrots instead of ranting about control of the garden. Ooh, look at this huge fire ant queen. Squish. Not that it's gonna really make a dent because there's millions more. But yeah, we'll do a video in a few minutes about pickling carrots and why I'm probably abandoning lacto fermentation, at least during the summer. As much as I love it, the taste and the probiotics and all the health benefits, it's just simply too risky in my opinion. It works like half the time, and the other half the time my food just spoils. So I'm just gonna go back to my tried and true pickling everything in straight vinegar. You can have vegetables in a jar, mason jar full of vinegar, and if you use straight vinegar and salt, you can probably keep those for years without any issues. But anyway, we're gonna look at the backyard, which is no longer a garden. So we talked about how lawns are the ultimate form of control over the environment, or at least the maintenance of the illusion of control. Little raised bed gardens and neat little tidy gardens are still a form of control, or at least we think we're controlling the environment. But my backyard garden, which I put a lot of time and energy and money into trying to make it a neat little tidy garden, and it looks that way for 2 months of the year. In January and February, it's a nice neat little tidy garden, and the other 10 months of the year, it's just a food forest. It's an absolute jungle. It's messy, there's weeds everywhere, there's bugs and flies, and lots of plants are wilting, and lots of plants have diseases, and it's just entirely out of control. There is no control here. Things just plant themselves. We're at a point where almost everything here is now just self-sowing. I don't really plant anything anymore. Seeds just fall everywhere. This is some cilantro plant that's now 5 feet tall and going to seed. There's 3 different varieties of mint that have managed to just take over most of the garden. I mean, these used to be nice little mulched pathways, and now they're just covered in mint. I have clover plants that are taller than me. Yes, I'm talking about clover. These are sunchokes that I'll probably never get rid of. I think I planted one tuber like 3 years ago, and now there's just sunchokes everywhere. The parsnips have become naturalized. There's parsnips everywhere, which is a little scary because if they start to revert to a wild type, I need to be really careful not to get all kinds of weird burns. You gotta be really careful working around parsnips because if you get the oils on your skin and you're exposed to sunlight, it's not good. Squash have pretty much died for the year. Oh, look at all my little frogs. I was filming the videos of the tadpoles the other day, and I had one tadpole that turned into a frog while it was in a pint glass, or a quart glass. It was in a big quart mug, beer mug. And I guess the frog had like laid its eggs in the beer mug at some point in time and just sat out here, and then I saw frogs popping out of the beer mug. But I pulled some massive cucumbers off of these vines, I think it was yesterday. I gotta get the rest of the patty pan squash out of here before the squirrels just eat it all. But yeah, so this is no longer a garden. Maybe in the winter it's a garden. In the summer it's just a food forest. You can't step anywhere without tripping over food. There's probably 200 species of edible things out here. There's just literally food everywhere. But at the same time, I have zero control over most of this. This is a huge comfrey plant. This is a parsnip that's going to seed. There's some okra back there I didn't plant that's just popping up. There's these like wild blackberries that are now everywhere, and there's not much I can do about it, and I'm not going to panic because at least they're edible, but they're taking over the garden. They came in on some pine. I brought in some pine logs for a raised bed, and apparently there were some blackberry seeds stuck to the pine sap because I started seeing blackberry vines come out of the pine logs, and now they're everywhere. This is a Italian dandelion plant that is 8 feet tall. I got some papaya trees here that I have no idea what's going to happen to those. This is all a bunch of clover. This was collard greens last year. My clover cover crop looks like it's taken over. I'll probably put, I don't know, lettuce or something like that in here in the winter. I want to say it was radishes 2 years ago. It's been peas a couple of seasons. It's been beans a couple of seasons. It's probably one of the more fertile plots. It's completely weed free. I know that sounds ridiculous to think about when you're looking at this. This is an entirely weed-free plot. Everything in here is beneficial, from the clover to the collards to the zinnias to the tomatoes to the sunchokes, the leeks, the garlic, the carrots. It looks like a huge mess, but there's not a single plant in here that isn't edible or at least extremely useful. Whereas there's other parts of the garden over here that look much neater and tidier, but are far less productive. The fact that this is constantly cover cropped, I want to say, has really made it a special part of the garden. I think rats and rabbits have probably eaten 90% of my carrots this year, despite the fact that I put out these huge rat traps in the carrot pots. Every morning I've been coming out here and finding carrots ripped up. Probably lost literally 90% of the carrots, but that's okay because I planted 2,000 carrot seeds and I lost probably 90% of them, and I've still harvested 200 plus carrots. So again, kind of becoming a mature farmer and becoming comfortable with not having control over everything. I'm really into the whole idea of do-nothing farming. You should read One Straw Revolution and learn about do-nothing farming. Mensuaba Fukuoka, one of my favorite farmers slash philosophers. Look, more sunchokes that I didn't plant. All this oregano is going to seed. So yeah, we don't necessarily have to fool ourselves into thinking we have control over environments or even strive to have control over environments, because attempting to control things to such a arrogant human degree is very expensive and not usually all that productive. You're much better just letting kind of nature do what it wants to do and selecting for the parts of nature that happen to benefit you and your table and your culinary preferences. There's some soybeans back here, edamame, parsnips that are 7 feet tall. This is my loquat tree that I was seeing almost eye to eye with last year, and now it's probably almost twice as tall as me. I got asparagus ferns back here, they're 8 feet tall. There's carrots going to seed back here. But I mean, it's a scary jungle now. There's probably, you know, snakes and spiders and all kinds of scary things out here. But I also don't have to do much. I'm kind of to the point now where we're at what we call harvest as maintenance. Pretty much the only work I have to do out here is just come out here and pick vegetables, which I'm not trying to brag here, but it can be honestly absolutely overwhelming. Tons of stuff just gets wasted now because I'm one person, and even though I give a lot of vegetables away to friends and family, and I simply cannot harvest things nearly as fast as they're growing now. So tons of stuff just, I don't want to say gets wasted, but there's a lot of things that rot in the garden or just get eaten by wildlife, and maybe that's not necessarily a waste if it's all nutrient cycling. I kind of do a no-till thing now, so when vegetables do fall to the ground and rot, they either get eaten by things on the ground or they just return those nutrients to the soil. So it's kind of like a in situ composting now. I guess there's some more carrots back here that didn't get eaten by rats and rabbits. It's kind of funny because I swear there's a battle between fire ants and rats. So fire ants really like things that are dry. They like very dry conditions. So fire ants, wow, look at those, that's crazy. Fire ants love to be in fabric pots. Wow. Carrots don't even grow well in the deep south because it's way too hot. But we've had a weird year this year. It's been shockingly cool. But anyway, so fire ants hate wet conditions, and so do things like carrots. So I put my carrots in fabric pots and keep them really dry. And carrots, as a root crop, also need really lightweight loose soil, which fire ants also like. So basically my point is the same conditions that are really beneficial for things like carrots are also really beneficial for fire ants. But fire ants don't tend to really eat carrots most of the time. So I tend to have this like cycle where sometimes I go out in the garden and there's tons of carrots that are ripped out of the ground by mice or rats or rabbits, and I lose all the carrots. And then a month will happen where every single carrot pod will get infested with fire ants, and then I don't lose any to rats or rabbits that month, because I guess the fire ants sort of deter the rats and rabbits, as ironic as that is. But I'm not really sure what's worse. Rats and rabbits are gross and eat all my food. Fire ants are a human health hazard and a danger to my dog, and I hate coming outside and picking vegetables and getting tons of fire ant bites all over me. But I mean, look at these carrots, y'all. This is a pot that was full of fire ants, and I didn't lose a single carrot. They're gigantic. I don't even know if you can see them in the bright sunlight. I need to put them in the shade so y'all can see them. Find some shade under this loquat tree. But I mean, look at these. Those are massive carrots. I need to put them down before I get bit by fire ants again, bit and stung. But so that's what I mean. The illusion of control. A lot of people are out there constantly controlling for fire ants and trying to put down poison for rats and trying to put up all kinds of fencing to exclude rabbits. And you just go down this, you know, rabbit hole, no pun intended, where the more you try to control an environment, the more money you just end up spending and the more stress you incur. So I encourage a lot of farmers and gardeners to not try to, you know, have complete control over everything all the time. It's okay to have some weeds popping up, and if you have a pest outbreak, just ignore it. Eventually some predators will come in and clean it up. If you got, you know, plants popping up that you didn't necessarily plant, doesn't mean you have to pull them or spray them. So yeah, my garden is no longer a garden. It's now a food forest jungle, which is fun. Yeah, it's messy and it looks gross and people complain about how it looks, but at the end of the day, I'm pulling food out of here hand over fist and not really doing anything anymore. The first couple years I had to garden, it was a lot of work, and now it's not really any work anymore. I just come out here and pick stuff. But you know, a few years ago, it didn't look a big mess. A few years ago, it looked all neat and clean and tidy, even in the summer. But neat and clean and tidy is negatively correlated with productivity. As ironic as that is, there's a lot of like these silly, you know, herbicide companies that have these slogans like clean fields, higher yields, and you know, stuff like that is great marketing, but at the end of the day, a natural biodynamic food forest is going to be far more productive in terms of both yields and you know, pounds or kilograms, and also in terms of the ratio of inputs to productive outputs. How much money, time, chemical, fertilizer, fossil fuels are you putting into your agricultural system versus what are you getting out of it? If you're putting in tons of inputs, you better have massive outputs and be able to move those outputs, whereas a food forest is the opposite model. You do almost nothing. I don't put fertilizer out here very often. I don't spray anything. I don't use weed killers. I don't use insecticides. I don't even come out here and pull weeds anymore. I just kind of let things happen. And like I said, it's a huge mess in terms of the aesthetics, but food is just rotting out here because I can't eat it fast enough. And I'm not going to have to buy a whole lot of seed anymore because so many things are just self-sowing now. I have things popping up in places I'd never expected them before. So we'll see. I'm not going to bother to even put up a greenhouse this winter. I'm really just kind of going to productively abandon most of this. There was a time where I left this garden for like 3 years and came back, and 3 years later there was still stuff growing, but it's a completely different animal now. I mean, one of the best compliments I think I've ever gotten was somebody came back here to pick some vegetables and they said, you know, when I'm in your garden, I don't feel like I'm in a garden. I feel like I'm foraging. And that's exactly what you want to go for. It doesn't matter what your garden or your farm looks like. It matters how productive it is, how sustainable it is, how much you're getting out of it versus how much you're putting into it. So yeah, I mean, we're at the point now where it's almost no work. It's just coming out here and picking stuff. If I see a really, really bad weed, you know, occasionally I'll pull it, but most of the time it isn't an issue anymore because the entire environment is dominated by things I like. So there's no vacuum, there's no opportunity for anything else to really come in here. I mean, I guess there's a couple weeds here and there that I probably should work on, but like this is a massive sweet potato patch. And there's tomatoes that are self-sowing in the sweet potato patch, and there's mint. And yeah, there's some like duckweed in here, but I think that's edible too, maybe. But I mean, I got sweet potatoes running in my neighbor's yard that I have to keep moving now. Sweet potatoes are a really cool crop, and I didn't even plant these, and they're just everywhere. I think this was from a sweet potato that got tossed in the compost pile literally like 2 years ago. And I think the one from the compost pile shot up some vines last year, and maybe they made some tubers, and I never harvested them. So then there were a bunch of tubers, and then they all made new vines this spring, and there's wild garlic back here that's established itself. And like I said, these are all blackberries. And yeah, so it's an absolute huge mess, and this huge mess costs me almost nothing now and produces more food than I know what to do with. It is the complete opposite of a lawn. A lawn costs you a lot of money to maintain and produces nothing. This costs almost nothing to maintain and produces a lot. But unlike a lawn, where we can convince ourselves that we have control, and we can try to, you know, convince our neighbors that we're so wealthy that we don't need to use our land to grow food. Unlike a lawn where you think you have control, there is no control back here anymore. It is beyond salvation. I don't think I could get this garden looking neat and tidy if I put in 50 hours a week for the next year. Maybe in the winter, if I came out here with a weed whacker and just like literally whacked down everything green, and I don't know. It's possible I could do that in February, but it's probably not really worth it. I'm not particularly worried about the fact that it looks awful. Nobody can evict me right now anyway during a viral pandemic, right? But anyway, thank y'all for tuning in, and sorry my phone cut off 3 or 4 times because of the heat, and I had to upload this video in 3 separate parts. This is obviously the final part 3, and I'll try to do something with the carrots pretty soon. I'll upload a bunch of videos of me pickling carrots. So thank y'all, and I'll look forward to sharing the pickling carrots video with y'all. But I think it's a little too hot to be pickling carrots out here right now. It is almost 90 degrees with, you know, insane humidity, and I'm getting eaten alive by fire ants again, but I don't want to put down the phone or these carrots. I need to replant the cucumbers in here. But yeah, didn't mean for this video to be so long and rambling, but Like I said, I lost 90% of my carrots to rodents and stuff this year, but it's not really anything to worry about because they're super cheap to plant and I still have lots of carrots.